In the town of Pomfret, the men get together 2 or 3 times a week to dig graves. This week it's for a young woman who's died of AIDS. But today the routine is broken by a visitor, the man they call their father, Colonel Jan Breitenbach.
Oh, buggers. You bastards.
These men once fought side by side on the battlefields of Angola. Once they were the most feared, most decorated unit in the South African Defence Force. Today they feel like the persecuted, their village is threatened with destruction. Breitenbach has come to say goodbye. It's 1975. Angola is on the eve of independence from Portugal. 3 Angolan liberation movements have been fighting for over a decade for control of their fatherland. The MPLA has massive backing from the Soviet Union and Cuba. UNITA gets arms and funding from America and South Africa. But there's a third movement, the National Front for the Liberation of Angola, or FNLA, which is slowly being driven out. They have no outside support. They flee south, and in the small town of Mphopa, on the Angolan border with Namibia, their fortunes collide with those of the South African government.
I made contact with them. We didn't know at the time who were actually in control of Mphopa, whether it was UNITA or MPLA or FNLA. So that was quite an egg dancing experience to go and make contact with these people. We didn't know who they were.
Colonel Jan Breitenbach had been sent by the chief of the South African Defence Force to recruit Angolan fighters. They would help the SADF crack down on guerrilla infiltration from Angola into Southwest Africa.
They looked like what they were, bank robbers and thieves. Of course, Angola was falling apart, you see, and everybody's for himself, and they had to make a living and so on. But they look awful. They were covered in sores. They had no boots, and they had, amongst a lot of them, I think there were only about 300 of them there then on that day. They had 8 rifles.
What was supposed to be a tentative exploration of ways to collaborate changed Breitenbach's role in the war completely. An interpreter called Pelisa steered history on this new course.
I was going to give them training aids. I helped them with training them and equipping them, and nothing more. Advice, that's it. But on the parade ground, Pelisa started, spouting forth the Portuguese to these guys. And eventually he turned around and saluted me, and he said he wants to congratulate me. I've just been appointed the FNLA commander of this battalion.
They lost their war against the MPLA, but to this day, these men believe they fought a just war against communism in Angola and South Africa. That's what Breitenbach had recruited them for. 30 years ago, they were refugees. Today, with the threat of relocation hanging over them, they're again on the brink of displacement.
África do Sul receberam a independência foi através de nós.
We work for South Africa, and that South Africa is independent because of us. And it wasn't the Blue Berets, the United Nations, who gave South Africa its independence. It was them. They're the ones who fought, and now they're abandoned.
Angela McIntyre is an oral history researcher from Wits University. She's recording the history of the veterans that's fast being forgotten.
I was very aware from the beginning of this project that I was going to face a challenge in terms of getting people to speak to me and getting people to open up and to tell their stories. People were warning me, oh, you're never going to find those guys, they're never going to speak to you, they have too many skeletons in the closet. I've actually found people to be remarkably open and talkative.
Angela's work in Pomfret began about a year ago. On her first visit, she heard that in January 2004, a General Bobo Moerane from the new SANDF had come to Pomfret. He came to announce that the community was to move. Pomfret would be demolished. General Moerane said every structure would be razed to the ground come end of last year.
A community is it's a support network. It's a vibrant and organic thing. And particularly in the case where you have a very culturally unique community like the one at Pomfret, to tear it apart, I think, would have very tragic consequences for many of the community members, particularly the more vulnerable ones, the orphans, the disabled veterans.
The Pomfret community came together through strife and displacement. In November 1975, after they had any training, the Buffalo Soldiers set off from their refuge of Mphopa to fight the mighty MPLA. For 20 years they worked for the South African Army. They rallied around the man they called Carpenter, Colonel Breitenbach.
He wasn't afraid to put himself in the line of fire. And he stood out as an example for his troops. He wasn't someone who sort of stayed in the rear echelons and gave orders from behind. I think he was always at the forefront. And, he tells stories of troops sometimes who were afraid, and he would literally grab them by the scruffs of their neck and haul them up and tell them, shoot, don't just sit there.
The first time they saw actually that these guys going in with them. So there was a sort of subtle switch of loyalty from the FNLA, loyalty to the FNLA and what it stood for, to these funny buggers from the south, you see, who actually were fighting this war as if it's their personal war.
The loyalties forged in battle were profound. As the unit's reputation grew, 32 Battalion became a favoured destination for many a white national serviceman. Service with 32 Battalion looked good on a CV. For 20 years, the apartheid government's operational orders kept coming in from Pretoria. Go for broke, keep SWAPO out of Southwest, and the MPLA and communism out of South Africa. More and more FNLA refugees and their families came here, Buffalo Base, on the Kavango River in the Caprivi Strip of northern Namibia. Then Namibia gained independence in 1989, and the South African Army had to withdraw. There was no question. 32 Battalion had to move too. They could never hope to return and live under the Angolan government that they'd fought. But the army generals promised them they'd be looked after, promised them a new home in the foreign country they'd sacrificed almost 20 years for. And so the epic trek to South Africa began, by road, by train, and by plane.
Esse vosso Kimbo. Bem dizer, esse é vosso país aqui. Ninguém que vos tira aqui. É por isso que os outros não queriam sair de fora para arranjar lugar para viver e continuaram a ficar aqui.
Eu estive perdida quando chegamos aqui no portão. Pensamos que estamos aonde? Era quase uma pessoa estranha, porque é um sítio que encontramos calmo, que é diferente.
Pomfret was an old asbestos mine. It's 2 hours drive north of Vryburg in what is today the Northwest Province. The SADF had the mine rehabilitated and then built a base and thousands of houses. Pomfret is the largest settlement in the rural Malopo municipality, which consists of 13,000 residents. After the Caprivi, Pomfret was cold, dry and alien. 32 Battalion had just settled in here when they were called up to quell faction fights between the ANC and IFP on Johannesburg's East Rand and in KwaZulu-Natal.
The opportunities for misdeployment had opened up. They got involved in work that I think would have been more appropriate for police. They themselves say that we were a military unit. We were not a police force. They hated the work in the townships. They found it to be far more dangerous than what they'd done on the border. They found it dishonorable, and they found it generally distasteful.
Policing the townships on the orders of their National Party bosses sounded the death knell for 32 Battalion. They were seen to be part of what became known as apartheid's destabilizing third force. Not surprisingly, the incoming ANC government wanted the discredited, hated unit disbanded. In 1993, 32 Battalion learned of their fate on television.
After 17 years service in 3 countries, 32 Battalion has been officially disbanded.
It was at 32 Battalion's base at Pomfret in the Northern Cape that the unit, arguably the most well-known and successful unit to serve South Africa during the Bush War, was officially disbanded. Members of this proud unit will now be transferred to other units within the South African Defence Force. Past and present members of the unit, however, feel sold out by what they call the politically motivated destruction of the best unit in the Southern Hemisphere.
I feel we've been betrayed, let down, because the politicians were using this unit's political power. And I don't think it's right, because they bled for this country. This man promised he would never be disbanded. Okay?
Este homem prometeu que nunca vos abandonará.
P.W. Botha promised he would never be disbanded.
Foi a promessa dela.
F.W. de Klerk promised he would never be disbanded. 3 weeks later, F.W. de Klerk disbanded you.
3 semanas depois, aconteceu.
He betrayed you.
For them, the betrayal did not stop there. Soon after 32 Battalion was disbanded, the Defence Force withdrew completely from Pomfret. This community of ill-adjusted, isolated civilians was left to fend for themselves. For more than a decade, the veterans and their families have been relying on each other and social grants. Few are still strong enough to work. They do what they know, work in private security. Living conditions have been slowly getting worse. And then the General came with an order for their removal.
Nós havíamos viver bem desde o tempo com os brancos. Agora vamos viver mal. Esse povo aqui tem que acabar. Porque os nativos estão vivendo na miséria lá nos quimbos deles. Não tem casa. Vocês têm água e luz. Tem as casas privadas. Não se pode.
Então ele disse, cada mês vai vir começar a levar pessoas para ir aonde que a pessoa vai. Porque o municipality contribuiu com o general Morani para escrever os papéis, assinar aonde que tu queres ir. As outras pessoas escreveram, eu disse, eu não sou escravo, não vou escrever. Ele que vem me matar aqui no Pomfret.
You can be proud that you are veterans of the best battalion ever in the South African Army.
Colonel Jan Breitenbach's visit comes at a time when a morale boost is sorely needed. The people have been told to put their names on a list. They must choose townships in the province where they want RDP houses. General Bobo Mwirani said it's because of asbestos that they must move, but no one here believes him.
We're also talking about the veteran wives.
Dia 15 de janeiro, quando veio, conversou com as pessoas no salão da comunidade. Ali até eu tinha levantado para dizer que o general Morani, antes de nós mudar, primeiro queremos tirar radiografia para ver se temos asbestos, porque aonde que vou morrer na mesma. Se tenho, tem que pagar primeiro.
Why was this asbestos question not addressed much earlier? Why have they been left to languish there with this obvious, health threat under their noses for so long? Why wasn't this given any consideration earlier?
Então, a primeira palavra que ele falou, que eu venho como business aqui. Ninguém que fala, que toca mais de falar, nada, só eu que falo. Você escuta o que eu estou falando, nada pessoa que pode falar mais. Então, nós todos aqui tivemos parado, toda essa comunidade. Ninguém abria a boca.
E ele disse que esse Pomfret vai fechar. E essas casas todas que estão aqui, tudo vai ser limpado tudo. O trator vai passar nessas casas. No fim de junho, metade do Pomfret vai sair. Nós todos esperamos até o fim de junho. Ninguém saiu. Dezembro, que ele disse que no dezembro, nem o capítulo do Pomfret já não vai existir. Tudo vai ser limpado.
I think there was general suspicion of this as a motive for their removal. Something that gave rise to this suspicion was let's call it the non-dialogue that took place between the community and the authorities, and in particular General Morani. I don't think there was any effort made to make the process transparent or participatory. One would think that if the real cause for the removal was some kind of a health crisis, that the people would be given as much information as possible.
It baffled the people of Pomfret that 17 years ago they'd been told to come to Pomfret. It was safe. The asbestos mine had been rehabilitated. There was no problem. Everyone knows about Heuningvlei, 70 kilometers away. Here you still see blue asbestos carpeting the area. The asbestos mine is totally unrehabilitated, but no one here has been told to get ready to move. Nowhere in Pomfret do you see this much asbestos. Special Assignment requested copies of the reports on which government has based their far-reaching decisions. The community certainly has not been shown them. Neither were we. Repeated requests for interviews with the Defence Force and General Mwirani were declined.
Ons mense wat hier gebore is en groot geword het, ek meen, al gebleik nou waarever is ek moes nou die asbestos maar reeds in my longe en dan is dit mos nou daar. So dan kan ek mos nou maar net sowel aangaan hier so maar verder bly. Wel, my broer is 50 en ek is 40 en ons toets gereeld en nie een van ons weet hy gaan jaarliks ook vir 'n ekstrale en nie een van ons het nog die stadium enige skade nie.
Susan Bonet runs the old army store. It used to turn over nearly R1 million. Today the stock is barely worth 30,000. And since few people have any money and there are no efforts at job creation, business is slow. Susan knows this community very well, and she knows why they believe they're being moved.
Die groot rede wat ons van die begin af gesê het. En hoekom ek dit sê is omdat hulle nie vir die mense saam op een plek wil laat bly nie. Hulle wil hulle versprei. So die groot rede dink ek is dat die mense maar vir hulle bedreiging is.
General Morani's announcement came at a time when there was a lot of attention in the press being given to the coup attempt in Equatorial Guinea. 60-some odd members of 3-2 Battalion and Kufut and the old Defense Force were imprisoned at the time, Chikurubi prison in Zimbabwe. I recall the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time making a statement to the effect that we don't want South Africa to be perceived as a cesspool of mercenaries. And I think that this drew some attention to Pomfret.
Security is the only trade these men know. They've worked as mercenaries in Angola and Sierra Leone and as security guards in Iraq and Afghanistan. 2 Pomfret men were among the coup plotters arrested in Zimbabwe. General Moerani didn't exactly come out and say so, but these men believe this is what's causing their problems. Even the youngsters and the wives, who never served in 32 Battalion but moved along to South Africa, are now fighting for their survival. Domingos Sebastião was one of the young men in the community who attended meetings with the general.
I think it has something to do with the security, because he mentioned somewhere along the way when we got a little bit angry that we are a security threat to the country, and I don't know. So I think the main reason might only be that, because I cannot see why the politicians are not getting involved, because we ask politicians to come and visit us so that we can discuss it with them.
So when people say that this band of bad people are mercenaries to go and get money and do this, I would rather say, yes, there are some companies who do that, but all of them are based within Pretoria and Johannesburg, right in the noses of the government officials.
And then the people heard that the Northwest MEC for Local Government and Housing, Pena Vilakazi, had actually said they were the problem.
That particular person said, no, Pomfret was a problem in the past. Pomfret is a problem in the present, and Pomfret is a problem outside the borders of the country. So now it tells me it has got nothing to do with asbestos. It has got to do with the members of community.
The people of Pomfret believe they will never live down being on the wrong side of history. And now they will lose the only neighbours they can rely on. They know they won't be welcome in any township where they may choose to live. But the MEC says there are no hard feelings.
There isn't. If there was, I would be the first one to have taken revenge. Because I can tell you what happened to me when I was in Mamelodi. And Battalion 21 was responsible. I can relate those stories. Today I'd had to negotiate with municipalities. It was not easy. There is a municipality that said to us, they don't come here. If they come here, the next night we'll wipe them out. So the negotiations have not been easy.
The community has appealed to the Human Rights Commission, the Red Cross and the South African Council of Churches to stop the move, to find out the truth about their health, to find a way to stay together. So far they've heard nothing. Local and provincial government firmly deny any motives other than asbestos. But there's pressure to get going. In the last month, the first 6 families were notified they should get ready. But they still don't know when any of this will happen.
Pomfret for me it's a test case for the new South Africa. It's a test of tolerance. It's a test of people's ability to accept people who are different. It's a test of service delivery, and I think it's a test of humanity.
Since the people of Pomfret were told they'd be moving, government services have slowly been withdrawn. The police have moved out. The municipal offices closed down. Social workers are never seen. The clinic barely operates. Water runs only sporadically. Sewage is broken down. At the high school, the matric failure rate shot up at the end of last year. Uncertainty has taken the wind out of everyone's sails. Small plans to improve one's life have been put on hold.
Estamos morrendo nas casas, sem comida, estamos morrendo nas casas, sem caixão, estamos morrendo nas casas, sem hospital, estamos a morrer em casa, sem água, sem luz. Luz vem 3, 4 dias sem a luz, 3, 4 dias sem água, 5 dias sem água, assim é uma vivência de uma pessoa.
Não é boa a situação. Estamos a sofrer. Estamos a sofrer mesmo assim. Só Deus é que está a nos tomar conta, porque toda semana podia ser 3, 4 mortos, 5, 6 mortos, mas Jesus Cristo está a olhar a nossa vida. Nós estamos a viver porque temos bom tratamento ou está a nos tomar bem conta. É Deus que está a nos tomar conta.
The community has become uninhabitable over this period of time. And whether this is some kind of a scorched earth strategy, to drive people out, it's not working. Pomfret is the home of those people and they're not moving.
But government says it's not negotiable. They say Pomfret is not an island that can demand special treatment. The people must be integrated into South African society, even if they're old, disabled, or orphaned, and can only speak Portuguese. In a year from now, Special Assignment was assured Pomfret would no longer exist.
This is a South African problem. It's not a political problem. It may be political because we have this background, we have these experiences with them. But now these are South African citizens. As a matter of fact, they carry IDs of South Africa. Some of them have not been to their country of origin. They were born in South Africa. So they are part of me, you see. They may have done all those things that happened. I have equally done some of the things. But we have come into an era where there must be reconciliation. And if people thought it was reconciliation between President Mandela and F.W. de Klerk, no. It's reconciliation even at that street level.
Once again, the people of Pomfret don't see anything reconciliatory in what's happening to them. It seems nobody can help. Not even the man they still see as their savior.
It was emotionally a debilitating experience for me to see that they are back where they were in Mapupa.
And worse off because then you could offer them something.
I could offer something. I can't offer them anything. I've got no means to offer them anything. And, because I could get back up then, and what do? You see, you feel so helpless.
So